Russia and Ukraine produce 1/3 of the world's wheat. And we do have to find a way to get out of this crisis that is induced by this illegal, unjust war.
Russia's war on Ukraine, it is really creating devastation globally. Starvation. Zelensky told your fellow Congressional Black Caucus member, Greg Meeks, that the blockade in the Black Sea of grains is causing starvation, particularly in Africa, places like the Congo, Ethiopia, etc. And also it's causing prices to go up in the grocery store. And then gas prices. What do you say to all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it just tells you how interconnected we are as a world, right? Nothing happens in separation from the rest of us. And I've long raised the alarm of food shortage that will result from Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. The devastation that I was talking about, I knew wasn't just going to be felt by Europe and Ukraine, but it would be felt by the rest of the world, especially from the country that I was born in. If you think about Sudan, who buys 90% of their grain from Ukraine and Russia, you think about Somalia, that is currently facing drought and famine. They get about the same, about 90% of their grains from Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine produce 1/3 of the world's wheat, and we do have to find a way to get out of this crisis that is induced by this illegal, unjust war, and not have it have a deadly consequence for millions who are already facing displacement in Africa and other parts of the world.
But you have Ukraine and Russia, and now India with its heat wave. We're in trouble.
We are in trouble. And you also have other countries that are, hoarding, right, their exports, and they're not participating. India has banned wheat exports. I think other countries are also doing that, and that's going to have a devastating impact. There's also just other crises that are happening. You're talking about the climate crises that we are faced with. I was just telling you about East Africa and the drought that's happening there. Millions, 5, 6, 7, 8 million are facing displacement. We're seeing what's happening in India. You're looking at Sri Lanka, that is about to fall into civil war because they don't have enough resources to feed their public because of this war. And so I do hope that world leaders are having urgent conversations, negotiating a peace between Russia and Ukraine, and doing everything that they can. In the supplemental Ukraine bill that we did, we included millions of dollars, an amount that has never been seen before in trying to address the food shortage that is happening around the world. But I know that that's not enough. America's commitment alone is not enough. We need the rest of the world to get involved. We also know that there's just coups and civil wars happening. The war in Yemen, still continues to take place. It's displaced millions of people, millions more face starvation and famine. We know what's happening in Lebanon and other places. So there's just a lot of crises to think about and consider. Even our border right now, we're not only seeing Central Americans, we're seeing people from across the world. And if you think about the journey that an African has to make to come to the border through Central and South America, like that I can't even fathom, right? I escaped from one country to a neighboring country, and that in itself has traumatized me for the rest of my life. I can't imagine the kind of trauma people are experiencing as they make that journey. And so there's a lot happening around the world, but here in the United States, we do have resources, we have capable people, we have legislators of goodwill, and I think we can continue to persuade the rest of the world to care as well, while we do our part.
Is Biden right not to lift sanctions on Russia?
I do think that some of the sanctions that are on can be helpful in trying to get Russia to stop its aggression. At some point, we have to think about what kind of collateral damage some of these sanctions will have. And I'm someone who thinks about that a lot, right? It's sanctions that ultimately drowned my country into civil war, the country I was born in. And it is that the foreign policy of the United States and then the Soviet that ultimately led for me to be a refugee. So I know that, countries can have their proxy wars, they can, superpowers can fight and do all of that. They themselves don't sometimes feel the damage and the carnage. It's others who get caught up in that. So on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I try to raise the alarm that sometimes the tools that we use might not have an impact on our intended audience, but it will have an impact on others who don't have a role in our foreign policy and don't have a role in what we are trying to prevent.